The December snow fell heavily outside my Chicago apartment as I stared at my laptop screen, watching my business account balance drop to zero. My mother had just transferred every penny of my hard-earned money to her personal account, thinking she was being clever. What she didn't know was that I had suspected her financial desperation for months and had prepared for this exact moment. The trap I had carefully laid was about to spring, and she had walked right into it. As I picked up my phone to call my lawyer, I felt a mixture of heartbreak and vindication. Christmas morning was about to become very complicated for both of us. The bitter Chicago wind rattled my windows as I sat in my home office, surrounded by the chaos of running a small digital marketing agency. At 28, I had built my business from nothing, working 16-hour days to establish myself in one of the most competitive markets in the country. My mother had always been proud of my success, constantly bragging to her friends about her entrepreneur son who had made it big in the city. But lately, her phone calls had become increasingly frequent, always ending with subtle hints about her mounting debts and dwindling savings. I had offered to help her multiple times, but she had refused, claiming she didn't want to burden me with her problems. Now, as I watched the snow accumulate on Michigan Avenue below, I realized her pride had been masking something much more dangerous. My mother, Patricia Williams, had always been fiercely independent, raising me alone after my father left when I was 12. She had worked double shifts at the local diner in our small Indiana hometown, sacrificing everything to put me through college. Her work ethic had shaped who I became, instilling in me the drive to succeed no matter the obstacles. But recent conversations had revealed cracks in her usually composed demeanor, mentions of late mortgage payments and credit card debt that kept her awake at night. When she called last week asking if I could add her to my business account just for emergencies, every instinct told me something was wrong. The desperation in her voice, masked by casual conversation, made my stomach turn with dread. I had learned to read people through years of client negotiations and business dealings, and my mother's behavior had all the hallmarks of someone backed into a corner. Her questions about my business finances had become more pointed, her interest in my daily operations unusually intense. She had even asked about my backup accounts and whether I kept all my money in one place, questions that seemed innocent but felt loaded with hidden meaning. The woman who had taught me about honesty and integrity was clearly planning something that went against everything she had raised me to believe. As I prepared for what I suspected was coming, I felt the weight of having to protect myself from the person I loved most in the world. The decision to set up a decoy account wasn't made lightly, but my business instincts told me to prepare for the worst-case scenario. I transferred most of my actual business funds to a separate account at a different bank, leaving just enough in the original account to make it look legitimate. If my mother was planning what I suspected, she would find exactly what she expected to find, but not nearly as much as she hoped. The trap was simple, but effective. She would get access to money, but not enough to truly damage my business, and her actions would be fully documented by the bank's security systems. As I finished the preparations, I felt sick knowing that I was essentially investigating my own mother, but my responsibility to my employees and clients had to come first. Christmas Eve arrived with a blanket of fresh snow covering downtown Chicago, transforming the city into a winter wonderland that felt almost magical. I had planned to drive down to Indiana to spend the holiday with my mother, as we had done every year since I moved to the city. My small apartment was decorated with the ornaments she had sent me over the years, each one carrying memories of Christmases past when money was tight, but love was abundant. The irony wasn't lost on me that the woman who had given me everything was now potentially planning to take everything away. As I packed my overnight bag, I checked my phone obsessively, knowing that the access codes I had given her would soon be put to use. The anticipation was killing me, but I had to see this through to the end. The 3-hour drive to my hometown of Lafayette gave me time to think about how we had reached this point. My mother had always been proud, sometimes to a fault, refusing help even when she desperately needed it. Her house, the same one I had grown up in, was showing signs of neglect that she couldn't afford to fix. The roof had been leaking for months, and I had noticed past due notices scattered on her kitchen counter during my last visit. She had dismissed my concerns, insisting that everything was fine and that she didn't need anyone's charity. But charity was never what I was offering. I was trying to give back to the woman who had sacrificed everything for me. Her refusal to accept help had created this desperate situation, and now we were both trapped in a web of deception that could destroy our relationship forever. Christmas morning in my childhood home felt different this year, charged with an undercurrent of tension that I couldn't shake. My mother had prepared all my favorite foods, filling the house with the aromas of cinnamon rolls and coffee that had defined my childhood holidays. She seemed unusually animated, almost manic in her cheerfulness, asking detailed questions about my business and my plans for the new year. When she casually mentioned needing to check something on her phone, I knew the moment had arrived. I watched her step into the kitchen, her fingers working quickly across her phone screen, and I felt my heart break a little more. The woman who had taught me right from wrong was about to cross a line that would change everything between us forever. The notification on my phone came exactly 37 minutes after she had walked into the kitchen. My business account balance had dropped from $47,000 to zero in a series of quick transfers, each one documented with timestamp and IP address. I sat on the couch where I had opened Christmas presents as a child, watching my mother steal from me with the same methodical precision she had once used to balance our household budget. She returned to the living room with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, asking if I wanted more coffee as if nothing had happened. The performance was almost perfect, but I could see the relief in her shoulders, the way her hands had stopped shaking. She thought she had solved all her problems, but she had no idea that the real reckoning was just beginning. Within an hour, I had documented everything: screenshots of the transfers, timestamps of her access, and photos of her using her phone during the exact window when the theft occurred. The evidence was overwhelming and would be more than enough for law enforcement and the bank's fraud investigation team. But as I looked at my mother, humming Christmas carols while she cleaned up our breakfast dishes, I realized that this wasn't just about money anymore. This was about trust, family, and the devastating realization that the person who had shaped my moral compass had lost her way. The trap had worked perfectly, but victory felt hollow when it came at the cost of destroying the most important relationship in my life. The call to my lawyer came that afternoon, made from the privacy of my old bedroom while my mother napped in her chair. David Chen had handled my business legal matters for 3 years and was familiar with my family situation. His voice was professionally calm as I explained what had happened, but I could hear the sympathy beneath his legal advice. "You have ironclad evidence," he said, "but are you prepared for the consequences of pressing charges?" The question hung in the air like a challenge, forcing me to confront the reality that seeking justice might mean sending my own mother to prison. He advised me to secure my remaining assets immediately and to consider filing a police report before she had a chance to move the money beyond recovery. As I hung up the phone, I realized I had about 6 hours before she would discover that the account she had emptied was just the tip of the iceberg. The afternoon stretched endlessly as I wrestled with the decision of when and how to confront her. Every smile she gave me felt like another knife to the heart, each casual conversation a reminder of the deception that now lay between us. She had prepared my favorite Christmas dinner, complete with all the traditions that had made our holidays special throughout my childhood. The ham glazed with brown sugar, the green bean casserole that only she knew how to make perfectly, and the apple pie that had been her signature dessert for as long as I could remember. We sat across from each other at the dining room table that had hosted countless family meals, and I wondered if this would be our last Christmas together. The normalcy of it all felt surreal, like we were actors playing out a scene while the real drama unfolded in the shadows. As evening approached, I made my decision. I would give her one chance to come clean, to explain her actions, and perhaps find a way to work through this together. The money she had taken represented months of work, client payments, and my team's salaries. But it wasn't irreplaceable. What couldn't be replaced was the trust between us, the foundation of our relationship that had been shattered by her actions. I found her in the kitchen, washing dishes with the same methodical care she had always brought to household tasks. "Mom," I said softly, "we need to talk." The dish towel fell from her hands as she turned to face me, and I saw the exact moment she realized that her carefully constructed deception was about to crumble. Her eyes widened with a mixture of fear and defiance, and I knew there was no going back. "I know what you did," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. The words hung in the air between us like a physical barrier, marking the end of pretense and the beginning of a conversation that would define our relationship forever. Her face went through a series of emotions: denial, anger, and finally, resignation. "You don't understand," she said, her voice shaking. "I didn't have a choice. They were going to take the house, everything I worked for, everything I wanted to leave to you." The justification felt hollow, but I could see the genuine desperation in her eyes. She had convinced herself that stealing from me was somehow protecting our family legacy, a twisted logic born from months of financial pressure and mounting debt. As she began to explain the full extent of her financial troubles, I realized that the trap I had set had caught someone who was already drowning. The conversation that followed was one of the most difficult of my life. My mother broke down completely, admitting to credit card debt exceeding $80,000, a mortgage that was 3 months behind, and medical bills from a cancer scare she had hidden from me for over a year. She had been living on borrowed time and borrowed money, using credit advances to pay minimum payments in a spiral that had no end. The theft of my business account had been her last desperate attempt to buy herself time, maybe even a chance to start over. "I was going to pay you back," she sobbed, "as soon as I got back on my feet." But we both knew that was a lie, a story she had told herself to make the betrayal bearable. The woman who had taught me about responsibility and consequences had lost sight of both in her desperation to survive. The revelation about her cancer scare hit me like a physical blow. She had faced the possibility of death alone, too proud to burden me with her fears or her medical expenses. The treatments had been successful, but the financial cost had been devastating, wiping out her savings and pushing her into the debt spiral that had led to this moment. I felt anger at her for lying to me, but also guilt for not seeing the signs, for not insisting on helping despite her protests. "You should have told me," I said, my voice breaking. "I would have helped you. I would have given you anything you needed." She looked up at me with tears streaming down her face and whispered, "That's exactly why I couldn't tell you. You've already given me everything. How could I take more?" As the full scope of her situation became clear, I realized that the trap I had set had revealed something much more complex than simple greed or betrayal. This was a woman who had spent her entire life putting others first, who had sacrificed everything for her child, now facing the consequences of her own pride and independence. The money she had stolen represented hope to her, a chance to solve her problems without burdening the son she had worked so hard to see succeed. But her actions had created a legal and moral crisis that threatened to destroy everything she had tried to protect. I sat at my childhood kitchen table, surrounded by the ghosts of better times, trying to figure out how to save the woman who had always been my hero. The trap had worked perfectly, but now I had to decide whether to spring it or find another way forward. The next morning, I made a series of phone calls that would change both our lives forever. First, I called my lawyer to discuss alternatives to criminal prosecution, exploring options that might allow my mother to repay the money and get the help she needed. Then I called my bank to report the fraud, but requested they hold off on involving law enforcement until I could present a comprehensive repayment plan. The bank manager, understanding the family nature of the situation, agreed to give me 48 hours to propose a resolution. Finally, I called my mother's mortgage company, her credit card companies, and her medical providers to get exact figures on her debts. The total was staggering, over $150,000 in various obligations that had accumulated over 2 years of desperate financial juggling. But it wasn't insurmountable, not with proper planning and my business income to support a structured repayment plan. The conversation with my mother about the repayment plan was emotionally exhausting but necessary. I laid out a proposal that would allow her to keep her house while paying back both me and her other creditors over a 5-year period. In exchange, she would have to agree to financial counseling, complete transparency about her spending, and regular check-ins to ensure she stayed on track. The plan would require sacrifices from both of us. She would have to swallow her pride and accept help, while I would have to trust her again despite the betrayal. "This is your chance to make things right," I told her. "But if you ever lie to me again, if you ever hide something this important, I won't be able to help you." She nodded through her tears, understanding that this was likely her last chance at redemption. The trap had become a lifeline, but only if she was willing to grab it. The legal paperwork took 3 days to complete, but by New Year's Eve, we had a formal agreement in place. My mother would repay the $47,000 she had stolen in monthly installments over 2 years, with interest. Additionally, I would provide her with a loan to consolidate her other debts, secured by her house, but at terms far better than she could get anywhere else. The bank agreed to close the fraud investigation in exchange for full restitution and documentation of the repayment plan. My lawyer had structured everything to protect both our interests, while giving my mother a genuine chance to rebuild her financial stability. As I signed the documents, I felt a mixture of relief and sadness. The trap had worked exactly as intended, but the cost had been higher than I had ever imagined. The drive back to Chicago felt different this time, heavy with the weight of everything that had changed between us. My mother had hugged me goodbye with tears in her eyes, promising to make things right and to never let pride put our relationship at risk again. The house I had grown up in looked smaller somehow, as if the events of the past week had shrunk it down to just another building, with just another family struggling to make ends meet. But there was also hope in that image, the understanding that struggle was normal, that asking for help was human, and that family meant facing difficulties together rather than alone. The trap I had set had captured more than just evidence of theft. It had forced both of us to confront truths we had been avoiding for too long. 6 months later, I received my mother's first repayment check, along with a letter that I still keep in my desk drawer. "Thank you for saving me from myself," she wrote. "I know I broke your trust, but I'm grateful every day that you didn't break our family." The financial counseling was helping her develop better money management skills, and she had even taken a part-time job at the local library to supplement her income. Her monthly reports showed steady progress on all her debts, and more importantly, she had started calling me when she faced problems instead of trying to handle everything alone. The trap had been sprung, but instead of destroying her, it had given her the structure and support she needed to rebuild her life. Trust was returning slowly, one honest conversation at a time. Today, as I sit in my Chicago office preparing for another busy day, I think about the lesson that Christmas taught both of us. The trap I had set wasn't really for her. It was for both of us, forcing us to confront the ways our pride and independence had created distance between us. She had learned that accepting help wasn't a sign of weakness, but a recognition of the strength that comes from family bonds. I had learned that sometimes the people we love most are the ones who need our help the most, even when they're too proud to ask for it. The business account she had emptied was just money, but the trust we had rebuilt was priceless. The trap had worked, but not in the way I had originally planned. Instead of catching a thief, it had saved a family. The snow is falling again outside my window, and I'm reminded of that Christmas morning when everything changed. My mother will be here next week for our first Christmas together since the incident, and I've prepared her favorite room in my apartment. The tree is decorated with the same ornaments she sent me over the years, each one still carrying memories of better times, but now also representing the promise of better times to come. She's bringing her famous apple pie and her latest financial reports, showing me that she's on track to be completely debt-free within 3 years. The trap I set had been designed to catch her in a lie, but instead, it had caught us both in the truth. Sometimes the best traps are the ones that set everyone free.